Mr. Funner. Mr. Funner lived in a teapot. It had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen and living room, and it suited Mr. Funner very nicely. One day Mr. Funner was having lunch. He wasn't very hungry, so he only had a daisy sandwich and a glass of toast. Delicious, he murmured to himself as he finished his funny lunch. After lunch, Mr. Funner decided to go for a drive in his car. Mr. Funner's car was a shoe. Have you ever seen a car that looks like a shoe? Say Funner. As he drove along, everybody who saw him laughed to see such a funny sight. What everybody liked seeing was Mr. Funner's car. And they would say, "Hey, look, the clown's got something funny to drive." He passed a worm at the side of the road. The worm thought Mr. Funner in his funny car was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He'd nearly laughed himself in two. He passed a pig in the field. The pig thought Mr. Funner in his funny car was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. She'd nearly laughed her tail off. Even the flowers he'd passed thought that Mr. Funner was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. They'd nearly laughed themselves out of the ground. Eventually, Mr. Funner came to some crossroads. He didn't know which way to go, so he looked at the signpost. One was pointing this way, other that way, 2 more up and down. Therefore, they're called north, south, east and west. Here's which way you want to go. Then, one of the signs said to the zoo, "Oh, that would be fun," thought Mr. Funner to himself, so he drove his shoe towards the zoo. When he arrived at the gate of the zoo, he stopped. It was closed. "I'm sorry," said the zookeeper. "We've had to close the zoo because all the animals have colds, and they're all feeling very sorry for themselves, and they're not feeling very happy." "Halt! Said Mr. Funner. And then he thought, Perhaps I can help tie them up, he suggested. Well, said the zookeeper, it's worth a try, I suppose. He opened the gate, and Mr. Funner drove into the zoo in his shoe. The first thing he saw was an elephant. It was true. The elephant was feeling very sorry for herself. Very sorry indeed. She was feeling very sad because what it to, he said, she's got some curve. That's why the zookeeper just said to Mr. Funner, so and all these animals are feeling very sorry for themselves. And the truth is, they can't help it. Mr. Funner stood and looked at the sad-looking elephant. And the sad-looking elephant stood and looked at Mr. Funner. Then, do you know what Mr. Funner did? He pulled a face, a funny face, it's what he didn't know about. Mr. Funner, as you can imagine, has ever good at pulling funny faces. The elephant giggled. She'd never seen anything so funny. And Mr. Funner pulled another funny face, and the elephant burst out laughing. The elephant laughed and laughed and laughed. She laughed so hard she nearly laughed her trunk off and felt a lot better. Of course, some animals need to get better, and the truth weapon is that Mr. Funner made some funny faces so they can not get their curves, and they're not looking unwell. They look better. Well, the first one is not looking unwell, it's looking better at long last. Mr. Funner went over to the lion house. There was a lion. And to tell you the truth of what it's ever true, this lion is not feeling ever happy. He was feeling extraordinarily sorry for himself. Mr. Funner stood and looked at the sad-looking lion, and the sad-looking lion stood and looked at Mr. Funner. Of course, others look sad and remember what I said. The truth is, I can't help it. Then Mr. Funner pulled the funniest looking face that's probably ever been pulled anywhere, ever. Now, you've heard a lion roar before, haven't you? Well, this lion roared too, with laughter. He laughed so hard, he'd nearly laughed his whiskers to pieces. Then Mr. Funner went round to all the other animals in the zoo. What a miserable looking lot.